I want you to think about the last time a system, a real, cold, bureaucratic system, looked right through you like you weren't there. Not a person, a system, a form, a number on a screen, a file on a stack. Now I want you to think about what it would feel like if that system decided, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, to drag you into a courthouse over $50. Not $5,000, not $50,000, $50. I had been a judge for 23 years when Dorothy Callahan walked through my courtroom doors. She was 38 years old. She worked 2 shifts cleaning hotel rooms. She had 2 children at home, and exactly the kind of life that this country depends on and consistently refuses to see. The city had taken her $50 parking fine and turned it, through late fees and processing charges and the quiet, compounding violence of bureaucratic math, into $312. And when she couldn't pay that either, they brought her here, to me. In her iron blouse and her worn-out shoes and her plastic folder full of documents she had assembled alone at a kitchen table at midnight while her children slept. I looked at her, then I looked past her, to the gallery, her son, 14 years old, arms locked around a backpack, jaw tight, watching his mother stand before a judge like she had committed some terrible crime against this city. She hadn't committed a terrible crime. She had bought her daughter's antibiotic. But when I asked her to explain herself, what came out of her mouth silenced every person in that room. The stenographer stopped typing. The municipal attorney put down his pen. And what I did next, what I reached into my drawer and removed in front of a full courtroom, I had never done once in 23 years behind that bench. Not once. Stay with me, because this is the case I still think about. The one that reminded me why I took this job in the first place, and what justice actually looks like when the law alone isn't enough. There are mornings in this courthouse that feel like the building itself is holding its breath. I've been a judge for 23 years. I've sat in that chair through summers that made the wood swell, and winters that cracked the plaster along the east wall. I've watched the light change through those tall, narrow windows, the way it comes in gray and hesitant on certain mornings, as if even the sun can't quite commit to the day. This was one of those mornings. A Tuesday in late November, the sky the color of old dishwater, the kind of cold that doesn't bite so much as it just settles into your bones and stays there. The courthouse smelled the way it always does in the early hours. Burnt coffee from the clerk's station, the faint chemical tang of floor cleaner, decades of paper and human anxiety baked into the walls. The heating system knocked and hissed somewhere in the ceiling above my head. The clock on the back wall ticked. It always ticked. 23 years, and I've never once been able to tune that clock out. I want to tell you something before I tell you about Dorothy Callahan. I want to tell you what I believe, what I have come to believe, slowly, the way you come to believe anything true, not in a single moment of revelation, but through accumulation, through the slow sediment of case after case, face after face, year after year. I believe the law is a blunt instrument. I believe it was built by people who meant well and inherited by a system that forgot them. I believe there is a version of justice that lives in the statutes and the procedural codes. And there is another version, older, quieter, harder to quantify, that lives somewhere in the chest, just below the sternum, and makes itself known as a dull ache when the 2 versions stop matching up. I have spent 23 years trying to close the distance between them. Some days the distance is manageable. Some days it is not. That Tuesday morning I had 11 cases on the docket. 11. By 9:15 I had moved through 4 of them. A noise ordinance dispute between 2 neighbors who clearly needed a mediator more than a judge. A small claims matter involving a contractor and a bathroom renovation gone wrong. 2 traffic violations that were exactly what they appeared to be and nothing more. Routine. The machinery of civil society grinding forward, indifferent and efficient. Then the clerk called the 5th case. I heard her before I saw her. Not her voice. She hadn't spoken yet. I heard her shoes. The soft, irregular rhythm of someone walking carefully. Someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible. someone for whom the act of crossing a room full of strangers in a position of authority is a kind of controlled terror. I looked up from the file. She was standing at the entrance to the gallery, just past the double doors, and for a moment she didn't move. She wore a white blouse that had been ironed. I could tell it had been ironed that morning, carefully, the way you iron something when you want to look like you respect the place you're going, even if the place hasn't given you much reason to respect it back. The cuffs were worn thin. Her slacks were black, practical, with a small pull along the hem that she'd probably been meaning to fix for weeks. Her shoes were the shoes of someone who stands on hard floors for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. Flat, black, the sole on the left slightly more compressed than the right from the way she favored it when she was tired. Her hair was pulled back, not styled, pulled back. The kind of ponytail you assemble at 6 in the morning in a bathroom with bad light when you have children to get ready and a bus to catch. 2 pieces had come loose at the temple and she hadn't fixed them or hadn't noticed, or had noticed and decided it didn't matter because there were 17 other things that mattered more. She walked to the defendant's stand. Her hands found each other immediately, both of them gripping a thin plastic folder, the kind with the elastic band around the cover, the kind you buy at a drugstore. Inside it, I would later learn, were 4 documents she had assembled over 3 evenings at the kitchen table after her children were in bed. A copy of her lease, a pay stub, a letter from the pediatric clinic, and the original parking citations. She had brought evidence. She had prepared. She had come ready to explain herself to a system she was already afraid of. She looked at me. Her eyes were brown and very tired, and they were asking a question she hadn't said out loud yet. The question was, "Are you going to be another wall, or are you going to be a door?" I looked back at her. I set down my pen. The clock ticked. 23:37. The clerk read the case number into the record. It echoed in the way sound always echoes in that room. Too much marble, too little warmth. The prosecutor that morning was a man named Gerald, a municipal attorney I had seen hundreds of times across 23 years. He was not a cruel man. I want to be precise about that. Gerald was not cruel the way some people are cruel, deliberately with satisfaction. He was something more common and in some ways more dangerous. He was indifferent. He processed cases the way a machine processes inputs. He had a stack of files on his table, and Dorothy Callahan was somewhere in the middle of that stack, between a zoning dispute and a business license violation. And when her name was called, he simply reached for her folder and opened it without looking up. He cleared his throat. "Dorothy Ann Callahan," he began, his voice carrying the particular flatness of a man reading from a document he has read 1,000 times before, "is present before this court on a matter of municipal civil enforcement. The City of Record has filed for judicial collection of unpaid parking citation penalties, together with applicable late fees, administrative processing charges, and court filing costs, in the total sum of $312. $312. He closed the folder. That was it. That was Dorothy Callahan, as far as the file was concerned. A name, a number, a delinquency. The system had reduced her to a receivable, a line item in a municipal budget spreadsheet that needed to be resolved before the end of the fiscal quarter. $312 standing between the city and a balanced ledger, and the city had decided it was worth the cost of a court date to collect it. I looked at the file in front of me. The original infractions were listed at the bottom of the first page in small print, almost as an afterthought. 2 parking citations, both issued on the same block, both within a 6-day window. Original fine per citation, $25. Total original debt, $50. $50. What sat before me now was the architectural achievement of bureaucratic indifference. $50. Left unpaid for 91 days, transformed by late fees and administrative charges and filing costs into $312. The system had not simply collected a debt, it had manufactured one. It had taken a small failure and industrialized it, added interest to someone's hardship the way you might add interest to an investment, compounding quietly in the background while the person on the other end of it tried to keep the lights on. I set the file down. I looked at Gerald. He was already glancing at the next folder in his stack. I looked at Dorothy. She was still gripping the plastic folder with both hands. Her jaw was set in the particular way that people set their jaws when they are trying very hard not to cry in a public place. Muscles tight, chin slightly elevated, eyes working hard to stay dry. She was staring at a fixed point just past my left shoulder, breathing slowly, holding herself together with the quiet, practiced discipline of someone who has held herself together through worse than this and didn't get a medal for it. On the bench behind her, in the third row of the public gallery, sat a boy. He was 14, maybe 15, tall for his age in the way that boys sometimes shoot up suddenly and then don't quite know what to do with the height. He was wearing a basketball jacket, the kind with the team name printed across the chest in letters that had started to crack and peel. His jeans had a worn patch at the right knee. He had a backpack on his lap and both arms wrapped around it, and he was watching his mother with the kind of focused, desperate attention that a person gives to something they are afraid of losing. He didn't know I had noticed him. He was too busy watching her. I picked up my pen, set it back down. I have a daughter. She's 34 now, lives in Portland, calls me on Sundays when she remembers, and on Tuesdays when she needs something. And I love her with the specific, helpless totality that parents carry around like a stone in their coat pocket. Always there, always heavy, forgotten until you reach in for something else and find it again. I thought about her. I thought about what it would mean to sit in that gallery and watch her stand at that defendant's stand with her jaw set and her hands white-knuckled around a drugstore folder. The clock ticked. I leaned forward. The room adjusted. A small collective shift, the almost imperceptible recalibration of a space when something is about to change. I had seen it enough times to recognize it. The stenographer's fingers hovered. Gerald stopped pretending to look at his next file. I looked at Dorothy Callahan and I asked her the only question that has ever mattered in 23 years behind that bench. Not what did you do, not how do you plead, not are you aware of the penalties. I looked at her and I said quietly, with the full weight of the room behind me, and nothing but genuine curiosity in my voice, "Mrs. Callahan, why didn't you pay? $23.38. She didn't answer right away. That's the thing people don't understand about courtrooms. The silences are not empty. They are full. They are full of the thing the person is deciding whether or not to say, full of the calculation happening behind the eyes, the ancient human arithmetic of how much truth is safe to give to a stranger with power over me. I have learned to read silences the way a sailor reads water. The choppy, defensive silence of someone hiding something. The flat, defeated silence of someone who has already given up. And then there is the silence that Dorothy gave me. The silence of someone who has been asked, perhaps for the first time by someone in a position of authority, to simply tell the truth, and is trying to remember how. She looked down at the plastic folder in her hands. Then she looked up at me. "My daughter was sick," she said. Her voice was low, steady the way a voice is steady when the steadiness is costing something. "She's 8, Lily. She had pneumonia last February. Bad pneumonia. The kind where they talk to you in the hallway and use words you have to ask them to repeat because you're hoping you heard wrong the first time." She paused, swallowed. "The hospital is on Clement Street. There's no parking on the block, not really, not for more than 15 minutes. I parked wrong, twice. Once on a Thursday when they were doing her chest x-ray and I couldn't find anywhere else. And once the following Tuesday when her fever spiked again at 2 in the morning and I just left the car and ran." The room was very still. I got the citations in the mail, both of them. I set them on the kitchen counter, and I told myself I'd deal with them when things calmed down. A breath. Things didn't calm down. Lily came home, but she needed 2 antibiotics. One was covered by insurance, one wasn't. The one that wasn't was $43. I had $51 in my checking account. She said it without shame, just fact. The arithmetic of a life lived at the exact edge of what's possible. I bought the medication. I told myself I'd pay the fines the following week. But the following week, I said gently, something else came up. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet now, but the tears weren't falling yet. They were held there, suspended, waiting. There's always something else, she said. I don't know if you know what that's like. I don't mean that as disrespect. There is always something. The car needs a belt. The school asks for a field trip fee. Marcus needs new shoes because he grew 3 inches in 2 months, and the ones he has are cutting into his feet. And I work. I work 2 shifts. I am not lazy. I am not irresponsible. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I'm just always $500 away from being okay, she said, and something always moves that line. The boy in the gallery, Marcus, had both hands gripped around his backpack straps now. His knuckles were pale. He was not looking at his mother anymore. He was looking at the floor. The particular posture of a teenager absorbing something he doesn't have language for yet, something that will take him years to fully understand. That the person he loves most in the world has been carrying a weight he never fully saw, and has been carrying it with more grace than he knew. I sat back in my chair. I thought about my father. I thought about him the way I always think about him in these moments, not as the man he became later when things got easier, but as the man he was when I was 9 years old, and the textile mill where he worked cut half its workforce in a single afternoon. I thought about the way he came home that day, the way he sat at the kitchen table and didn't speak for a long time, the way my mother made dinner from what was in the pantry and didn't ask him anything, and the silence between them was not cold but careful, the way you are careful around something fragile. $50. I looked at Gerald. He had stopped looking at his next file entirely. His pen was resting on the table. Even Gerald, indifferent Gerald, was still. I looked back at Dorothy and I made my decision. Not in that moment. The decision had been accumulating since she walked through those double doors with her ironed blouse and her worn soles and her plastic folder full of documents she had assembled alone at a kitchen table while her children slept. But it became conscious in that moment. It became a sentence. I opened the drawer to my left. I want to say this carefully because I know how it sounds and I know some people will disagree with me. A judge is not supposed to reach into his own pocket. A judge is supposed to apply the law, full stop, and leave his personal finances at the door. I know this. I have believed this, in the abstract, for 23 years. But there is a version of impartiality that mistakes coldness for fairness, that confuses the appearance of neutrality with the substance of justice. And I have watched that version of impartiality destroy people who didn't deserve to be destroyed. And I decided a long time ago that I would rather be wrong in the direction of mercy than right in the direction of indifference. I took out my checkbook. The sound of it, the soft, specific sound of a leather checkbook being placed on the bench, landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. I heard someone in the gallery draw a sharp breath. I heard Gerald's pen roll off the edge of his table and hit the floor. I heard the clock. I always hear the clock. I wrote slowly. I wrote the amount. I wrote my name. I tore the check along the perforation, a clean sound, precise, and I stood. In 23 years, I had left that bench during a session exactly 4 times. Each time there was a reason. This was the 5th. I walked down the 2 steps from the raised platform and I crossed the floor to where Dorothy Callahan stood, and I placed the check on top of her plastic folder, and I looked at her. She looked at the check. She looked at me. That covers the original $50, I said. The rest, the fees, the processing charges, the court costs, I am dismissing in full. The record of this citation will be expunged. I kept my voice even, not soft, not performative. Even. The way you speak to someone when you want them to understand that you are speaking to them as an equal. This debt was manufactured from a moment of love. A mother who parked a car badly because she was running toward a sick child. I will not allow the machinery of municipal finance to collect a penalty on that. She was crying now. Not the held-back crying from before. Real crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than the eyes, the kind that has been waiting a long time to happen. I put my hand briefly on the plastic folder. A single gesture. Then I walked back to the bench. I picked up the gavel. Case dismissed, I said. The gavel came down. Thud. I have thought about Dorothy Callahan many times since that Tuesday morning. I think about her the way I think about all the cases that stayed with me. Not constantly, not obsessively, but the way a song you heard somewhere comes back to you at unexpected moments. Standing in line for coffee, driving home on a quiet road, sitting at my bench on a slow afternoon when the docket is light and the courthouse is almost peaceful, and the clock is ticking and the light is coming through the tall windows at that particular angle that makes the dust look like it's suspended in amber. I think about her hands on that plastic folder. I think about the boy with the backpack. For several weeks after the case, I heard nothing. That is normal. Most of the people who pass through my courtroom pass through and disappear back into their lives, and I never know what happened to them. That is the nature of the work. You intervene at a single point in an ongoing story, and then the story continues without you, off the page, out of the building, down the courthouse steps and into the city and into the years. You make your decision and you let them go, and you trust that something you did or said or didn't do landed somewhere useful. But sometimes you find out. 8 months after Dorothy Callahan stood at my defendant's stand with her iron blouse and her worn shoes and her $50 debt manufactured into 312, my clerk came to me before session with a small envelope. Standard white envelope, the kind you buy in a box of 100. My name written on the front in careful, deliberate handwriting, the handwriting of someone who learned penmanship from a teacher who believed it mattered. Inside was a single index card. On the front, in the same careful hand, "Your Honor, I was promoted to head of housekeeping supervision at the Meriton Hotel in August. I now make enough that I could pay you back 3 times over. But when I called the court to ask how, your clerk told me you'd said to consider it paid. So instead, I'm doing something else." I turned the card over. I opened a savings account. I put $50 in it the day I got my first supervisor's paycheck. I wrote a note and I put it in an envelope in the back of the account book. The note says, "For when love costs something." I don't know if that makes sense to you. It made sense to me. It made sense to me. It made more sense than most things I have read in 23 years of legal documents. I sat with that index card for a long time. I read it twice. Then I put it in the top left drawer of my desk, the drawer where I keep the things I return to. There are not many things in that drawer. A photograph, a letter from a man I sentenced to community service who later became a paramedic and wrote to tell me about it. A drawing that a child made once in this very courtroom while her father testified. A drawing of a son with too many rays that she handed to my clerk on her way out. And now Dorothy Callahan's index card, with its careful handwriting and its $50 and its note that said, "For when love costs something." I think about Marcus, too, the boy with the backpack and the cracked letters on his basketball jacket, and the knuckles pale from gripping the straps. I think about what it meant for him to sit in that gallery and watch what happened. Not the legal mechanics of it. He probably didn't fully understand those, and it didn't matter. What he understood was something simpler and more important. He understood that his mother had told the truth to a room full of strangers, and the room had not punished her for it. He understood that someone with power had looked at her and seen not a debtor, not a case number, not a line item in a municipal budget, but a person. A mother who ran toward her sick child and parked wrong and chose the antibiotic and tried to hold everything together on 2 shifts and $43 and whatever was left at the end of the month. He understood that that was enough, that she was enough. I believe that is worth more than any sentence I have ever handed down. I have been asked over the years whether I think the system is broken. It is a question journalists ask. Law students ask it. Sometimes people ask it in letters they send to the courthouse. Letters that arrive addressed simply to the judge, as if there is only one of us and somehow the post office knows which chair I sit in. My answer has always been the same, and it has never been fully satisfying to anyone, including me. The system is not broken. It is incomplete. It was built by human beings, and it reflects all the things human beings are. Logical and compassionate and efficient and blind, sometimes brilliantly right and sometimes catastrophically indifferent to the faces behind the case numbers. It needs people inside it who remember that the distance between a statute and a human being is not a technicality to be ignored, but a responsibility to be honored. Every single day, in every single case, even, especially, the ones that seem small, the $50 ones, the ones that Gerald picks up without looking up from his stack. Those are the ones that matter most. Because Dorothy Callahan did not come to my courtroom with a dramatic story. She came with a plain one. She came with the story of a woman working 2 shifts and raising 2 children, and making the choices that people make when every choice costs something, and there is never quite enough to go around. That story is not exceptional. That story is everywhere. It is in the lobby of this building right now, in the people waiting on the benches outside, in the files stacked on Gerald's table, in the cases I will hear tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The question is never whether the story is dramatic enough to deserve attention. The question is whether the person telling it is seen. I saw Dorothy Callahan. I genuinely hope, that she felt it. Now, I want to ask you something directly before you move on with your day. If this story stayed with you, if something in it landed somewhere real, somewhere in your chest just below the sternum where the real things tend to land, I want you to stay. Subscribe to this channel because every week I come back to this desk and I tell you another story from 23 years behind that bench. Stories about people who deserved better and got it. Stories about people who needed to be stopped and were. Stories about the $50 moments that turn out to be the ones that define us. Because justice, at its best, is not a verdict. It is the moment a person realizes they were seen. Don't miss the next one. If this story stayed with you, I want you to pause for just a moment and ask yourself something honest. Have you ever been reduced to a number by something that was supposed to serve you? A system, an institution, a process that looked right through your face and only saw your debt? Have you ever had to choose between 2 things that both mattered, knowing that whatever you chose, something would fall through? And have you ever been seen, truly seen, by someone who had every reason to look away? Dorothy didn't need a dramatic story to deserve compassion. She needed someone to ask the right question and then actually listen to the answer. That's all any of us ever need. Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about justice, compassion, and the quiet dignity of ordinary people, don't forget to subscribe. There's another case waiting, and some of them will change the way you see everything.